Why are you sitting down? It's common sense for a wife to stand. I was 7 months pregnant. At a family gathering, my stomach started hurting, so I sat down, only for my husband to kick my stomach. Hey Thomas, what the hell do you think you're doing? Shut up! Besides, it's probably just a girl in there. Brian also changed his tone and called out to Thomas. But Thomas retorted without any regard for me and arrogantly dismissed it. I watched Thomas as he walked away. Unaware of my gaze, Thomas sat down with a mean smirk. However, my gaze shifted to a person who stood up in front of Thomas. This person walked up to the seated Thomas and then took a certain action against him. My name is Elizabeth. I'm 30 years old. I moved from the countryside to New York for college and then found a job. I married Thomas 2 years ago, and we're now expecting our first child. I met Thomas at work, where he was the son of the president of a client company. Thomas has an older brother, Brian, who works as a senior executive in the company and is a so-called elite with a degree from a foreign university. There are rumors that Brian might become the president. Although Thomas isn't the heir, he seems to intend to work in the company as a senior executive for a long time. At first, I wondered why someone like him would take an interest in me. But Thomas's persistent courtship didn't stop, and I eventually started dating him. Thomas was very kind, and his company was stable with a long history. I became more attracted to Thomas and decided to get married. I quit my job when we got married, influenced by a comment from my mother-in-law, Karen. It's only natural for a woman to focus on her family after getting married. And at least until the child is 3 years old, the mother should raise them. When I announced my pregnancy, Karen first told me this. Apparently, she didn't like that Brian's wife, Linda, didn't quit her job even after getting pregnant and giving birth. It's pitiful to send children to preschool. Working while leaving your child in preschool makes our company look bad. Karen would badmouth and complain about Linda every time we went to visit. Thomas, hearing this, wouldn't stop Karen's complaint. Brian's just too lenient with Linda, but would instead agree with her. I don't have any entrepreneurs in my circle. So maybe there's something I don't understand between the eldest son's wife and the mother-in-law. That's why I couldn't say anything about their conversations. However, perhaps interpreting my silence as agreement, both Thomas and Karen thought I shared their views, and their bad-mouthing of Linda only escalated. After all, it's not like the company would be in trouble without Linda working. Maybe Linda is saving up money for when she divorces Brian. Nothing good comes when a woman has money. There were times when I thought it was too much, but I was too ashamed to argue back. I had heard that Linda wanted to work because she felt the company couldn't function without her. But Karen seemed to dislike that statement itself. Elizabeth quit right away, so we don't have to worry about that. Unlike Linda, I wasn't against quitting my job. So, I didn't resist much when I was told to quit. However, I definitely felt uncomfortable with Karen and Thomas, who never asked about my feelings. Because of this, I became a housewife right after getting married. But then, Thomas started to make comments that seemed to look down on me. You're not working, so at least do the housework properly. He would complain like this when he came home. Of course, I did what I could, like cleaning, laundry, and preparing meals. But as a newbie housewife, I didn't know what more I could do, and I started to feel uneasy whenever Thomas was around. When I went to my parents' house, Thomas would even complain to Karen that I, a housewife, couldn't even do household chores properly. Believing him, Karen also started to complain to me. Elizabeth, it's troublesome if you don't properly support Thomas. The wives of my sons are all so useless. Karen started to scold me too, and I felt smaller every time I visited my husband's family. Yet, At least it's better than Brian's place. Those two don't even bother to visit our home. Well, that's true. But hearing that made it impossible for me to distance myself from my husband's family. I feared the backlash I might face if I ever distanced myself from them, especially after seeing Thomas's proud expression every time those words were said. Gradually, I began to think that I was better off than Linda, the eldest son's wife, despite how harshly Thomas treated me or how much Karen scolded me. Thinking I was better than Linda somehow helped me get through it. Time passed since our marriage, and I found out I was pregnant. Both Thomas's parents and Thomas himself were very happy about it. One day, I went shopping alone. It was for dinner groceries. However, I started feeling sick on the way and couldn't make it to the supermarket, ending up sitting on the side of the road. "Are you okay?" Someone approached me at that moment. "Oh, isn't this Elizabeth? What happened?" It was Linda, coincidentally. She had just finished her part-time job and was on her way to pick up her daughter from preschool. Among those who passed by me without a word, Linda stopped her car to check on me. Having heard so much about Linda from Karen and Thomas, I didn't trust her and brushed her off. "I'm fine." I pushed her away, but Linda stubbornly said, "I'll drive you home, so get in the car." I hadn't finished shopping, but I wasn't in a condition to shop. Hesitantly, I got into her car, and Linda bought me tea and drove me home. It felt like it had been a long time since someone had been so kind to me. I was moved to tears. Maybe it was because the morning sickness had made me emotionally fragile. Linda listened to my story the entire way and comforted me. Later, remembering my complaint about not being able to eat anything due to morning sickness, she brought me jelly and ice cream. "These are what I eat, so I don't know if you can eat them, Elizabeth." I was very grateful when she handed them to me. However, that night, when Thomas opened the refrigerator, he frowned at its contents in confusion. "What's with this jelly? And all this ice cream? It's a waste of money, especially when you're not working," I retorted. "No, that's not it. Linda brought them over because I was having a hard time with morning sickness and couldn't manage." "Linda did?" I nodded in response. I explained how Linda had coincidentally helped me when I felt ill on the street and couldn't move, and how she had later brought me some snacks. Hearing this, Thomas frowned. "I see, we've caused her trouble." Or, "That was kind of her." That's why I told him the story, but Thomas's reaction was far from what I had imagined. "What are you doing? Don't make us owe that couple anything." After I finished my story, Thomas said that, holding his head in his hands. "Huh? Why? She helped us. There's no need to talk like that." I couldn't help but voice my opinion. Then, Thomas glared at me with sharp eyes and slowly took out a trash bag. "Just throw this away," and began to throw away the snacks one by one. I could only watch in shock. "Never rely on the money from someone who disregards mom's advice and works on her own." Thomas said that. In Thomas's view, Karen's words were absolute. I couldn't find the words to respond. After that, Linda contacted me a few times, concerned about my health, but I always told her I was fine to avoid any trouble with Thomas. There were days when I felt so ill I wanted to ask someone for help. No matter how bad my morning sickness was, if I cut corners with the housework, Thomas would complain. Yet, the one thing I couldn't do was ask Linda for help. Somehow, my morning sickness settled down, and I reached 7 months of pregnancy. At the recent checkup, the baby's growth was on track, and we found out the gender, so we slowly started preparing for the arrival. "It looks like the baby is going to be a girl," I reported to Thomas right away. But he seemed not very interested. Maybe men have a harder time feeling the reality of becoming a parent, and Thomas is probably no exception. I didn't say anything more about it. Then we welcomed the new year. Every new year, relatives gather at my husband's family home. Even my brother-in-law's family, who usually don't visit, come with their whole family for the new year. I'm home. Happy New Year! We visited my husband's family home together on January 2nd. Happy New Year! Elizabeth, how are you feeling? It seemed the brother-in-law's family had arrived earlier, and Linda immediately spoke to me. She's fine. Don't worry about it. Even though she was addressing me, Thomas responded with a forced smile to Linda and went inside without properly greeting her. Elizabeth, I've been waiting for you. It's been lonely without someone to talk to. Karen welcomed me as usual. Despite Linda being there, Karen said she was lonely, which made me greet her with a wry smile. However, the incident happened that night. To prepare for dinner, Karen, Linda, and I were in the kitchen. Apart from us, there were about 15 relatives, including my father-in-law's siblings, gathered at my husband's family home. Thomas, who had already started toasting with the relatives, was speaking the loudest. Work is going smoothly, and Elizabeth listens well to me and Mom, so my life is going great with a good wife. That wasn't a compliment to me. It was clear to everyone that it was a dig at Brian and Linda. Elizabeth, could you bring the beer? Yes. Karen seemed to find me more convenient to use than Linda, always asking me for help. I was bustling around with my big belly. But, inevitably, I started to feel some discomfort from moving too much. Linda was the first to notice. Elizabeth, you've been rubbing your stomach. Are you in pain? Oh, really? You should have said something. You need to rest for a bit. Karen quickly responded to Linda's observation. Though her tone was a bit sharp, she told me to take a break. Thinking I'd be in the way in the kitchen, I sat in a chair in the room next to the living room, rubbing my belly and watching what was happening around me. In front of me, Brian was feeding his and Linda's son, Anthony. Are you okay, Elizabeth? If you can't do something, you should tell Mom. Your health is important. Thank you. Brian said that to me. And we chatted for a bit. We talked about when Anthony was born and what he likes now. Hearing stories from Brian, a father, was very insightful, and it was clear he was very involved in parenting. Do you know the gender of your baby? Yes, it seems to be a girl. That'll be cute. However, Thomas, who overheard this, seemed displeased and stood up with a sour expression. I thought he might be heading to the bathroom, but instead, he came straight over to me. Why are you sitting down? What? I was taken aback by his sudden question. As I asked Thomas for clarification, he shockingly kicked my stomach. It wasn't with much force, but I involuntarily cried out and doubled over in the chair, clutching my belly. The shock of being treated that way left me unable to move, more than the pain itself. Dramatic much. It's common sense for a wife to stand. Why are you sitting here chatting while making Mom work? Hey, Thomas. What do you think you're doing? What's the big deal? It's just a girl in there anyway. Eventually, she'll get married and leave, and she won't be any use to the company, so it's fine. Brian's tone changed as he addressed Thomas. However, Thomas retorted without any consideration for me and arrogantly dismissed it. Hey, that's too much. Although I couldn't see who it was, I heard a relative calling Thomas out. I've decided not to be a pathetic husband who spoils his wife like someone else. If my wife is being negligent, it's up to me to correct her. Laughing, Thomas said this and then walked away from me. The problem is that Brian can't control Linda. He lets her do whatever she wants. Do you think someone like that can control the company in the future? Dad should think about it. I think I'm more suited to be the president. I'm sure Mom thinks the same. Hearing this, I felt like I finally understood what Thomas was thinking. Thomas's behavior of affirming everything Karen said and acting under her influence was probably to gain her support. The same goes for saying bad things about Brian and others. It seems that Karen was upset about losing the position of president to her eldest son, Brian, so she decided to have Karen tell her father-in-law to make her president. That's why he had been forcing me to act in a way that would make Karen like me. I glared at Thomas, who was laughing and sitting in his own seat, unaware of my gaze. However, my attention then shifted to my father-in-law, Richard, who stood up in front of Thomas. Richard, confirming that Thomas had sat down, silently stood up and approached Thomas. "What?" And then, Richard kicked Thomas hard. Everyone was left speechless by this. Even Thomas was stunned and unable to speak, staggering from the impact. "You don't have a child inside you, so it should be fine. And if a child is wrong, it's up to the father to correct them." Richard said this and tried to grab Thomas by the collar. "Dad, calm down." The one who stopped him was Brian, who had been ridiculed by Thomas all this time. "Brian, aren't you upset about being talked down to all this time?" Richard said this. But Brian just laughed. "Not at all. I actually felt sorry for him." "What?" "Because it's true, right? Obsessing over the title of president to the point where you can't even cherish your family. If you're that desperate to be president, then go ahead, let Thomas do it." Thomas turned beet red at those words. The company and the title of president that he wanted so much. Maybe he felt like he had lost to Brian, who had said something that made him give it away so easily, and maybe he was also embarrassed by being called pitiful. Plus, I believe families should work together and respect each other, not control each other. The same goes for our employees. I want to create a company where employees cooperate and respect each other. Since I'm not good at controlling people, Thomas, who can control things better, should do it. Besides, my family is more important to me. It was clear who was more suited to be president. Despite Brian provocatively offering the presidency to Thomas twice, Thomas, being the person in question, couldn't find the words to respond and just turned redder. He only opened and closed his mouth without saying anything coherent. "All right, that's enough." Linda was the one who changed the tense atmosphere. "Thank you, Richard, for standing up for Brian." Richard showed a slightly embarrassed expression at her words. And Thomas looked down, even more frustrated. "Thomas, did you think Brian couldn't control me because I sent Anthony to preschool before he was 3, just like Karen said? Because that's the reality, right? We're a president's family, and we have to consider how it looks from the outside. Brian really thought about it. He wouldn't let you work, Linda." Thomas only seemed confident when he could argue back. I was utterly astounded by such a Thomas. Indeed, that's true. But it's not like Brian didn't think about it. He asked me to quit too. But I wanted to work, so I asked him. If you're going to blame someone, blame me alone. Compared to them, Brian and Linda seemed wonderful to me. Their relationship, where they care for and respect each other's desires, was admirable. It made me feel foolish for ever worrying about what Karen said. "Until the child is 3? What's that about? Was Karen saying such arbitrary things?" Richard seemed unaware of Karen's statements and sighed in exasperation, apologizing. "I'm sorry, Linda and Elizabeth, for any distress caused by Karen's words." "Please, there's no need to apologize. And hearing Thomas's words earlier, I'm truly sorry, Elizabeth, for how Thomas's foolishness must have made you feel uncomfortable. Richard sincerely apologized to us without concern for others' opinions. Instead of needing an apology, I felt guilty that Richard was apologizing to us when he was actually protecting us. Karen, who had come into the living room at some point, was flustered by Richard's demeanor. I just meant... She tried to make excuses with an uncomfortable expression. While I believe her comment about children staying home until age 3 wasn't intended to be malicious, the fact remains that her complaints and harsh words hurt Linda and pressured me. Karen, don't make excuses. Isn't it embarrassing to interfere in parenting? Richard reprimanded Karen, who seemed to finally realize the foolishness and irresponsibility of her words. Linda, we're truly grateful to your family's company. Of course, you're welcome to continue working. We understand that the company can't function without you, so please continue to support us in both business and personal matters. Richard then addressed Linda, which confused everyone. Thomas, Karen, myself, and even the other relatives were puzzled by his words. Dad, remember we agreed not to talk about Linda's family business? Brian said with a laugh, followed by a troubled smile from Linda. What does that mean? I asked Linda, as I'm sure everyone was wondering the same. Linda opened her mouth to meet his expectations. My dad's the president of the company. My marriage to Brian and the company have nothing to do with each other, but it seems Brian only told Richard about it. The room went silent at Linda's words. The company she mentioned was well known in the area, much larger than Richard's and also a business partner. Linda's father, the president, was busy and disliked public appearances, so no one knew his face. Karen and Thomas had met him as Linda's father but had no idea he was the president. Linda worked as an executive director in her family's company. The revelation shocked Thomas and Karen, who had been disparaging Linda's work. The two of them have been making fun of Linda, who works there. They probably never expected her to be the daughter of the president of a company that their company is indebted to. They were at a loss for words, unable to even formulate an apology. However, it's clear after today's events that I cannot entrust the company to Thomas. Thomas finally received a definitive statement from his father-in-law. I understand you care about the company and its dealings, but a company is its employees. Someone who can't cherish their family can't possibly cherish their employees. Thomas, pale-faced, pleaded for forgiveness with a deep apology. You're right, Dad. I was wrong. Please give me another chance. Despite Thomas's desperation, Richard raised his voice again. You're apologizing to the wrong person. At those words, Thomas, shaking, stood up and staggered towards me. I instinctively covered my belly, fearing he might do something again. Seeing this, Thomas seemed hurt and began to cry, kneeling down. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. The baby must have been hurt too. I'm so sorry. Thomas broke down in tears, appearing to truly regret his actions. Behind him, Karen also muttered, Linda, I'm sorry. I said terrible things to you. Linda, hearing this, smiled and dismissed it. You should be apologizing to Elizabeth. She's been under a lot of pressure listening to my complaints. And the baby in her belly must have heard all of Grandma's words too. Karen, taken aback by Linda's words, apologized to me. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. Both seemed genuinely remorseful, and Linda and I shared a smile. However, Richard was not satisfied with their apologies. Karen and Thomas, get out. I don't want to see your faces today. He then had Karen and Thomas leave the room. After they left awkwardly, a relative spoke up. "Come on, Elizabeth and Linda, let's eat together." "Yes, let's eat." "Yes." And so, surrounded by everyone, Linda and I enjoyed a pleasant meal. For the first time visiting my husband's family home, I spent an enjoyable evening. Richard's anger didn't subside for a while, and Thomas was eventually banned from the house. His dream of becoming the president vanished, and though he remained at the company, there was no sign of advancement from his position as a regular employee. Perhaps because of this, Thomas no longer talked incessantly about the company. When I, unable to forgive him for kicking my stomach, suggested divorce, he offered a deep apology and promised never to drink alcohol again. I proposed a separation, but Thomas, with nowhere else to go, ended up staying at the company, managing with delivery meals and showering at a gym. This lifestyle seemed to take its toll, as Thomas lost a considerable amount of weight within a month. However, he continued to work daily and kept in touch with me. "Do you need anything? How's your health?" Gradually, I began to open up to Thomas again. Feeling pity for him, I told him he could return home, and upon his return, Thomas apologized once more. He seemed like a changed person, not only refraining from complaining about housework, but also taking the initiative to do it. "You rest, Elizabeth." Now, with my growing belly, he even takes care of the more strenuous cleaning tasks for me. Richard, seeing this change, has allowed Thomas to visit the family home again when he has time. Karen has also become much quieter, no longer speaking ill of Linda. "I want to work hard for my family now, rather than just for the company." Thomas now often expresses such sentiments. Although I can never fully forgive him for kicking my stomach, I believe people can change. With the current Thomas, I feel confident we can happily welcome our baby.
Enough! I'm just an unwanted child anyway. A young girl screams with all her might, longing for her mother's true love. What is a family really? As I ponder this eternal question, I hold the crying girl in my arms. My name is Emily. I became pregnant for the first time at 32. My husband Kenneth is 35 and has a child from a previous marriage. This is my first marriage, but Kenneth's second. He has a daughter with his ex-wife, Rosie. Rosie's infidelity was the cause of the divorce. Kenneth wanted to take his daughter, but she, only 2 at the time, adamantly refused to leave Rosie. Reluctantly, Kenneth let her go, as Rosie promised to take care of her. 5 years after the divorce, Kenneth still pays child support, but has never seen his daughter. I met Kenneth 4 years ago. We married a year after dating, and soon conceived. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about Rosie's child, but I harbored no negative thoughts. Instead, I felt sorry for Kenneth, unable to see his child. Before my pregnancy, I hadn't thought much about children. However, carrying a new life made me realize the pain of being separated from one's child. The mere thought of being apart from a newborn is terrifying. Maybe I'm slowly gaining a sense of parenthood. One day, while walking with Kenneth after a prenatal checkup, he suddenly exclaimed, "Ah!" he exclaimed. In front of us was a couple, arms linked. "Wow, long time no see," the woman said to Kenneth. "You too. Wait, isn't Stephanie with you?" I recognized the name. This woman was Kenneth's ex-wife, and Stephanie, their daughter. Despite living in the same city, their encounter left me speechless. Stephanie? Isn't she at home? She seemed indifferent about her daughter, out on a date with a man, possibly her boyfriend or husband. What's with that tone? You should know where your child is. She's in elementary school. She can stay home alone. She's only a first grader. Alone at home? Don't meddle in other people's business. Stephanie is my daughter. Sure. Keep paying the child support, okay? Hey! Ignoring an angry Kenneth, she and the man quickly left. A few days later, while shopping alone, I saw a familiar woman approaching. Perfect timing! I was about to go to your house. Here, take this. She thrust a young girl with a school bag in front of me. Her daughter, Kenneth's Stephanie. She must have learned her address through Kenneth. What I thought was coincidence wasn't. I'll be away for a while. Can you look after her? Wait a minute. Before I could respond, she disappeared. How fast? Left with Stephanie, I suggested. Let's go home. I couldn't leave her there. She was expressionless, silent, and immobile. Finally looking at me. I know I might not be perfect, but please take good care of me, she said politely. A first grader? Really? Confused, I let her roam. I'm so sorry. I gave Rosie a piece of my mind. Kenneth apologized when he returned from work. It's okay. We can't leave a small child alone. I understand. It's unclear what Stephanie thought of her father, but she quietly read her book. A very well-behaved, quiet girl. That was her first impression. Odd for a first grader not to miss her mother after a few hours, yet she said nothing until Kenneth got home. Want some snacks? Or, how about watching some anime? I tried to engage her. Don't worry about me. But all I got was, do you enjoy school? What's your favorite food? When I asked. Nothing in particular, she simply replied. Eventually, we both fell silent. It was incredibly awkward. That woman, she's off on a week-long trip with her new boyfriend, not even thinking about where to leave the child. It's just terrible. How did she handle these situations before? Probably our recent accidental meeting made her think she found the perfect place to leave Stephanie. Her parents are long gone, Kenneth murmured softly, filling the air with a sense of helplessness. For a week, Stephanie remained a good girl. You might think that's good, right? No, I think it's not good at all. She's a child, right? Still a first grader. Isn't this the age to be a bit troublesome? In the end, she stayed good, and the week ended with an awkward silence. Then the day came for Kenneth's ex-wife to pick her up. On that Sunday morning, Stephanie seemed unusually restless. Mommy, is she coming? She's still a child, missing her mother. Just as I was thinking this. What? You said your wife was there, right? Listen, my wife is pregnant and can't manage everything. You know that, right? Think about Stephanie's feelings, waiting eagerly for you. Kenneth's angry voice echoed. Stephanie looked out the darkening window with sad eyes. Her mother didn't come to pick her up at the agreed time. When Kenneth called her, she must have said something came up. Kenneth was furious. No pickup time for Stephanie today. Keep your promises! It's cruel, isn't it? Hey! Hey! You're kidding me! She hung up. Kenneth stood stunned after being abruptly cut off. Stephanie, how do I explain this? As I reached to touch her shoulder, she slapped my hand away. Stephanie? It's fine. What? It's fine! I'm just an unwanted child anyway. Stephanie, wait. Mommy always does this. Always choosing men over me. Always coming home late. Never cooking. Always just fast food from the grocery store. Just bread for school trips. Never coming to classroom observations. And she won't come to the upcoming sports day either. Stephanie. Tears overflowed her eyes. Am I unwanted? Am I just a nuisance to Mommy? I kept my promise. I was good. But Mommy. Stephanie. Unable to hear more, I hugged her tightly. At that moment, he probably couldn't hold back anymore. Stephanie burst into tears. She must have been holding back all this while, believing that being good would make her mother care. There were no unnatural injuries or shabby clothes on Stephanie. Her mother provided care, in a sense. But what a young child needs most is love. A tight hug, a gentle stroke on the head, to be told, I love you, you're precious. That's what she never received from her mother. Stephanie! Kenneth couldn't help but embrace her too. Dad. Their relationship had been awkward all week. A father and daughter, connected by blood, looking alike, but between them lay a thick wall, built over the long months of not being able to meet. However, the moment Kenneth hugged Stephanie, it felt like the wall between them crumbled. For a while, the three of us continued to embrace and cry. Eventually, her mother came to pick her up, but not until another week had passed. A month after Stephanie returned to her previous life with her mother. I want to take Stephanie back. Kenneth spoke to me with a serious expression. It's okay, I immediately replied. Are you sure about deciding so quickly? What are you talking about? I've thought a lot over this month. If you hadn't brought it up, I would have suggested it. Really? Yes. After all, Stephanie is your daughter, your beloved daughter, and she's going to be the big sister to our baby. I rubbed my swollen belly. At that moment, as if agreeing, the baby inside kicked. Overwhelmed with happiness, I looked at Kenneth. She needs a family that loves her, not just someone who lives with her and feeds her. She needs a real family. Emily, let's go get her. Our precious Stephanie. Thank you. Honestly, I still don't feel like Stephanie is my daughter, but she must feel the same. To her, that woman is her only mother, and she can't see me as a parent. That's okay. Better than leaving her with that woman. I can't bear to see her cry like that again. It doesn't have to be a mother-daughter relationship. Family doesn't have to be just that. That's what I want to believe. But we shouldn't force her. We need to talk to Stephanie first and understand her feelings. Yes, her feelings are what matter most. Thank you. It's something I can't do. Dad, you should do it. Of course. I'll also consult a lawyer to make sure we can get custody without any issues. Please do. And so, we began preparing to welcome Stephanie. But things moved unexpectedly fast. Starting with Stephanie's sudden appearance at our house. One day, returning from a baby checkup, I found someone sitting in front of our house. It was Stephanie. What happened? Mommy? She burst into tears. Her hands were incredibly cold. How long had she been sitting there? Seeing Kenneth rush home early after my call, she cried again. After she cried herself to sleep, Kenneth called Rosie. What? You don't want her anymore? What does that mean? Rosie's voice came through Kenneth's phone on speaker mode. So my current boyfriend doesn't like kids. I can't keep her here. Just don't let the man into the house. He wants to live together, but I can't just abandon Stephanie, right? I don't want to be accused of being cruel to my child. Leaving her outside our house is cruel enough. What can I do? I just delivered her to her father's house. She's your Stephanie, you raise her. Fine. I get it. I'll raise Stephanie with all my love. She'll never go back to you. Is that what you want? That's what I'm saying. Oh, and I can't pay child support. I have no income. I don't expect anything from you. I'll see a lawyer tomorrow to start the process of changing custody, so make sure you cooperate. Okay. My boyfriend is calling. Bye! With a flippant reply, she ended the call. A long silence followed, broken only by Kenneth's deep sigh. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. Right, I'll check on Stephanie. Please stay with her. Emily? Yes? Thank you. I returned Kenneth's tired smile with my own. I didn't know what would happen, but just like the child in my belly, I was determined to protect Stephanie too. That decision, however, didn't make the sudden start of parenting easy. I hate this. I don't want it. I won't eat it. Don't talk to me. The complete opposite of her previous visit, Stephanie was now a difficult child. Probably due to the anxiety of being away from her mother. She needed to vent her feelings. I endured patiently. You can't throw things just because you hate them. Everything has life. You won't grow if you don't eat. You can't communicate if you just keep to yourself. Tell me about yourself, Stephanie. Gradually, as I continued to interact without faltering, Her attitude began to change. As my due date approached and I was rubbing my growing belly, Stephanie hesitantly came closer. Seeming curious about my belly, I asked her, "Do you want to touch it?" "Can I?" "Of course. Just gently." "Yes." With blushing cheeks, Stephanie gently touched my belly. At that moment, ah! The baby kicked. It's saying it can't wait to play with you. Did it kick because I touched? Is the baby mad at me? No, not at all. It's saying it's excited to have you as a big sister. Big sister? Yes, Stephanie, you are this baby's big sister. Really? I'm a big sister. Although she wasn't blood related to me, she indeed was the baby's big sister. That thought felt strange to both of us, and we shared a smile. It was the first time she truly smiled from her heart. Soon after, our son, Theo, was born. As a first-time mother, I was extremely cautious with the newborn. Kenneth, too, was gingerly holding the baby, his touch hesitant after so long. Stephanie was astonished by the presence of a baby, a brother, and the innocent face of the sleeping infant. Our strange relationship, no doubt, looked like a real family to anyone. Over 10 years have passed since we welcomed Stephanie into our family. Now, close to graduating high school, Stephanie has finally grown out of her rebellious phase. These days, it's Theo who's more troublesome. One day, Kenneth received a call from Rosie, his ex-wife, after more than a decade of estrangement. What could it be? I was worried. After the call, Kenneth summoned Stephanie and me to the living room. "Rosie wants to see Stephanie." "What? Why now?" "Apparently, Rosie is alone now. She must be lonely. Always so selfish." Kenneth spat out angrily, raw emotion in his voice. I felt the same. After all these years of ignoring Stephanie, not even trying to see her? But the decision to meet or not was Stephanie's. Kenneth and I looked at her. "Stephanie, it's your decision." To Kenneth's question. "I want to see Mommy," she said. "I see. But just to meet. I don't want to live with her." I momentarily thought she couldn't forget her biological mother, but her next words surprised me. "My place is here, with Dad, Emily, and Theo. Here. Only. Stephanie. But still, Mommy is Mommy. Please understand my desire to see her." "Of course." She has grown up, become an adult. I was moved to tears by her ability to express her feelings so clearly. Stephanie calls me by my name. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me, but I don't wish for her to call me anything else. In any form, we are a family. That was enough for me. And then, Stephanie went to meet Rosie. She planned to stay for a few days during the long weekend. I was worried. What if meeting Rosie made her feel that she preferred her real mother? What if she wanted to live with her? I had no right to stop her, but I feared Stephanie might get hurt. My only wish was that she wouldn't be hurt, or end up in tears. But Stephanie came back to our house. She returned the same day, even though she was supposed to stay over. What happened? Kenneth and I were surprised. She told us, "I met Mommy. We talked about a lot." Her conversation with Rosie went like this. "You've grown so much. Well, it's been over 10 years. What will you do after graduating high school?" "I'm going to college." "Wow. Then you'll get a good job, won't you?" "I've decided what I want to do, and I'll work hard to achieve it." Amazing. Just like my daughter. Stephanie gave a wry smile, but Rosie didn't notice. "You must have been uncomfortable living with a woman who's not your real parent." "That's not true. Emily was very kind. The packed lunches for school trips were delicious. We even ran in the parents' relay at the sports day. She always came to classroom observations." "It must be nice to have so much free time." Rosie laughed mockingly, and Stephanie couldn't overlook it. "That's not fair. You never did anything for me." "Mommy was very busy." "You weren't working, were you?" "Well, I managed the child support from Dad." "Huh?" "That stopped when you went to live with Dad. I've been struggling. And now I don't have a boyfriend, so I'm totally out of money. But if you live with me, it'll be fine. Huh? If you take up part-time jobs, we'll manage. You can work hard, right? What are you saying? I'm not living with you. Ugh, Stephanie said with quiet anger. I came today to put an end to things. I've always wanted to tell you something. What is it? Thank you for raising me until elementary school. So you're going to repay the favor? Wait, listen to the whole story. And thank you for leaving me with Dad and Emily. They loved me very much. Emily gave me the love you never did. An overflowing love. That? Rosie was speechless, her body rigid. Family can be formed without blood ties. That's what I learned. My family is only those people. Mommy is mommy, but not family. I wanted to say goodbye properly. Goodbye, Mommy. I won't see you again. Wait! What about my life? That's not my concern. Find another boyfriend? Sorry, I'm really sorry. If you resent me for the past, I apologize. So, no need to apologize. I don't resent you. I'm thankful for letting me meet my current family. So that? Stephanie shook off Rosie's begging arms, smiled again, and said, Goodbye. So, she parted from her mother. Is that okay? Yes, I intended to do that from the start. I won't meet her again. Didn't I say? My place is here. My family is everyone here. Dad, Theo, and Mom. Huh? I was momentarily confused by what she called me. Surprised, Stephanie. Making a funny face, she said with a laugh. What did you just say? Mommy is Mommy. Dad is Dad. Theo is my brother. And Emily is Mom. Right? Her cheeks flushed with a shy blush. Mom, Stephanie repeated, and I couldn't hold back anymore. Stephanie! Wow! She looked puzzled as she embraced me, tears streaming down my face. Really, Mom always cries so easily, she said, laughing. After that, the whereabouts of that woman, who fell into debt, remained unknown. Our family's connection with her was completely severed. Hey Stephanie, you forgot your lunch money? Oh no, I have a part-time job and we'll be home late today. Call me when you get to the station. I'll come pick you up. No need for that. It is necessary. It's dangerous. Alright, I understand. You worry too much. What kind of mom wouldn't worry about her daughter? Stephanie, now a university student, seems busy, but happy with her student life. Her constant smiles make me happy too. I'm off then, Mom! She waves as she leaves. I too smile and wave back, wishing happiness for her family today as well.